decir que las imágenes que están atrás nuestro van a ir pasando por sí mismas rápidamente, y decidí poner mucho material muy diverso que un poco es el trabajo de varios años, o sea, desde mitad de los 90, y que sucedió muchas veces en la academia, en diferentes escuelas en Londres o en Estados Unidos, con mi propia práctica, concursos, instalaciones, y me gustaba como disipar el material y no volverlo muy fijo, muy fija la atención sobre una sola cosa. Quizás lo que tienen en común los trabajos es que trabajan sobre al menos dos escalas. En realidad muchas veces trabajan sobre muchas escalas diferentes, pero el planteo de la doble escala es una especie de constante que tiene que ver con el desarrollo de lo que en general suelo llamar prototipo diferencial, y el desarrollo de algún tipo de situación de campo en la cual ese prototipo diferencial justamente opera, se adapta a las condiciones y indexa características del territorio, que básicamente todos los trabajos tienen el desarrollo más o menos profundo de o un prototipo diferencial o una situación de campo o ambas, y muchas veces suceden estas relaciones entre dos escalas, suceden como en múltiples escalas. Esto es un poco también parte de lo que desarrollé en el Landscape Urbanism en aquella época, en los fines de los 90, y tiene que ver con la idea del proyecto de arquitectura como un proyecto que tiene diversas escalas interconectadas en lugar de trabajar sobre escalas segregadas.
So my first question has to do with the way you think technology has the ability to engage with culture. What is the relationship between the two? And at the discipline of architecture, today, how do you think technology affects the way we conceive of the disciplinary assumptions that we have? Which are they? What are the things at stake today?
The use of the word technology in contemporary architecture and of technology itself is something that I think came together with a number of categories from modernism that were valued in a particular way under the logics of mechanistic thinking, in which, as you said, technology was conceived as an instrument to fulfill certain promises or certain determinations or agendas that, in the case of the modern architect, it was the desire of the architect, basically, or the way in which the architect would mediate forces. But technology, like other concepts that came from modernism and were reappropriated from the 90s onwards, to my point of view, were appropriated in a way that was there actually to challenge that model, in the sense that the way in which basically digital technologies or post-industrial technologies are able to produce forms of delivery that are irreducible to the premises and therefore are creative or predictable in relation to what drives them. In that sense, I think that the problem of performance or of efficiency in architecture, to me, it's a kind of has two sides. On the one hand, it's let's say it's very interesting as long as it is seen in a sort of cynical way, like as a means to something else rather than as an end in itself. So in that sense, I would share the critique to performance anxiety, let's say, but I would not back up from that, but rather go through it, in the sense that that a number of technologies at work nowadays are actually able to give us something that is counterintuitive. So in that sense, to me, that's the role of technology, or what should be the role of technology in architecture nowadays. However, that discourse that in the 90s had a certain cynicism embedded became very literal, and there is a number of affiliations to technological development that are quite literally related to technology with a certain optimism, let's say, with the same driving forces as in modernism, like optimization or efficiency making, or given that context in which culture and the market have appropriated this new idea of technology as a new form of efficiency. In the last 10 years, I've been thinking that it was a little bit of a mistake to assume that the cultural discourse was embedded in this appeal for technology, and therefore I think that it is important to kind of restate explicitly how architecture culture changes as a result of the incorporation of digital technologies.
So the thing about the discipline is, have you encountered, or have you ever thought, like within the discipline, what is a topic or a thematic that is affected directly inside architecture? Like typology, for example, or is there, I don't know, tectonics? Is there something that is about technology and the inner guts of the discipline that is important to you?
That itself changes in time, but so I went through a number of phases. I had phases in which basically what was collecting back the nonlinearity of technology was tectonics. For a long time, and partly that had to do with, let's say, late 90s, when software was too unconstrained and didn't allow one to introduce limitations and material restrictions in the models. So at that time, one of the sort of architectural agendas was to artificially introduce in the models limitations, tectonic and structural limitations. Then there was another period, I would say, in the early 2000s, when I started to become more interested, particularly through the landscape urbanism program. I started to be more interested in how dealing with technologies that enable you to construct integrated systems. Basically, you can expand the role of the architect beyond its limits and engulf other disciplines. However, the rhetorics of that had two different understandings. Let's say I was traditionally I was usually more interested in the expansion of the role of the architect and in the empowerment of the role of the architect, not necessarily in the interdisciplinarity as such, which I think it's a problem to take it as such. So that was another phase in which it was mostly about expanding the domain. That had its, both stages have a counter movement. So the first one had the counter movement of how are we different from engineers. The second one had the counter movement of how are we different from consultants, and so on. So in the last I would say, I don't know, probably a little before the crisis, the economic crisis, I thought that it was important to literally engage with the type of knowledge that is just particular to architects. So basically, and I do that even today. So basically, I work constantly against historical discourses and historical models or historical or typologies, and that's a way I'm finding that is in a way irreducible to other fields, basically.
The second question has more to do with what's coming tomorrow, the Ecological Urbanism conference. And I am speaking from the point of view of the non-expert. So If I commit any crimes, forgive me. The one thing that I noticed, that you've talked about a little bit now, but what I've noticed is that you have jumped all over the globe around. So my question has to do with these experiences you've had from many different places you've been in. The line of thought is like how to connect technology and urban design, right? The idea is like there. What is the role of technology in the urban design? I will call something urban condition, which I will try to explain. If we consider different continents and different cities, it's possible, although it might be a crime, it's possible to kind of put them in categories. And one basic category I can find is a fairly new city that is like doesn't have a lot of history, that has a socio-cultural kind of background that is receptive to the new. It's receptive to new technologies. And in this kind of situation, you can more easily imagine a smart city big project, like the rethinking of infrastructure, or how ecological concern can radically change the form of or the function of a city or a neighborhood. So that is the receptive city. On the other hand, there is, if we think of a European city, for example, we have stratification. There, what's going on is that history has layer upon layer built something that is like a mammoth right now. It's a little bit more although we have the same kind of a similar kind of receptivity of technology, maybe in a little more critical kind of way. Still, the biggest issue is there how to kind of work with the rigidity that has been accumulating over the years. Their projects would probably be a little bit more subtle. They would be about pushing and pulling and not about implementing like from top down. So my question to you is like, because you've witnessed many different kinds of cities, you've worked with them, you've lived in them, is there any such condition that you can identify for South America? Is there anything that is particular to South America that you could describe in those terms, even if you commit a crime also? And what I'm interested in is, can you kind of project a way technology would be used as an agent of transformation in a city like that?
Yeah, I was going to. I mean, it's not that I want to avoid the question, but actually I want to avoid the question.
Okay.
No, because in a way, I mean, what moved me across different places is the fact that I don't believe in identity, or at least I don't believe in the productivity of identity. Mm-hmm. I think that there is. I'm more interested in singularity than in identity, in the sense that one can create differences rather than one can support oneself on existing differences. Mm-hmm. So, in that sense, I would avoid the question and say, that's not American city, that's not European city, mm-hmm. There is not such a thing as a Latin American city. I would prefer to think that. It's equally generic to think that, but I prefer it as a point of departure. Okay. In that sense, I think of the question of kind of moving around as a question of constantly alienating yourself and constantly operating as an alienator of conditions. Mm-hmm. And to me that's the reason why I would move around. So in that sense, I mean, now yes, I can answer your question, which is probably, and I mean, just to say something, for example, the first time I went to Bolivia in my life was when I was 35, and I went from London, because I did a research in London on what I was calling minor civilizations, and it was about self-organizing systems, mm-hmm. as a model to understand informal processes of urbanization, mm-hmm. And how to construct forms of intelligence that were instrumentalized by normatives that are implicitly happening in these self-organizing processes that happen at many scales, from the material scales to the regional or territorial scales. And to me, that's, I mean, what is interesting about saying that I did that from London is that I was actually not so interested in the Latin American city as such, as a sort of identitarian condition, as much as I was interested in using the Latin American city in order to deterritorialize the dominant discourses in London. Okay. And so that's the way I would think of this sort of mobility. The moment these categories get too settled, like now it's a cliche to say that informal processes are self-organizing and all of that. So the moment this settles, to me, I become kind of less interested in that.